Okay, let's get into Miss Ice Cream Queen Pelosi. So if you are not aware, Jose Vega and his comrades have been confronting politicians at some of these town hall meetings about their support to fund this war with Russia and Ukraine. We've seen them confront AOC, Jamal Bowman, Richie Torres, just to name a few. But now they have confronted Miss Ice Cream Queen herself, Nancy Pelosi. Let's get into this story. So this came from Jose. He said, my friends and I confronted Speaker Pelosi. We reminded her she admitted there were no WMDs, told her that the financial system is collapsing because of her, and that she is going to make Taiwan the next Ukraine. Let's go ahead and get into this story here.
You know, Pelosi, that's a very good place for you in the depths of hell, because for some reason you have a very bad obsession of getting us into war. Hey, why is it that you did not admit that there were no WMDs in Iraq? You lied us into a war in Iraq. You got us into an invasion of Afghanistan. Now over 90% of those people are impoverished and are dying.
I just want to pause here for just a second, and I want you to pay attention to the people in the audience. If you notice, most of the people in the audience are older, right? You can tell by that. Look at the age groups, right? What's interesting to me is that they're the ones who are booing the protester when they come from a generation that was heavily involved in protest. It is the younger people showing up to these events that are willing to push back on these narratives that are coming from these politicians, that are willing to challenge the narrative, that are willing to do the research to see if what they are being told about this conflict with Russia and Ukraine is correct. Meanwhile, it is the older generation at these town halls that are just sitting back and they're booing the protester. That's something I want you to take note of. These are the people that think about this. The Vietnam War protests, civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement. They come from that generation where they know the system was working against them, where they know that it took mass movements of people to push back against the narrative that was coming from the US government and the policies that were implemented at that time. And somewhere along the way, I feel like some of them fell asleep and they are willing to sit back and now boo the protester when some of them in that audience might have been protesters back in their day. This is how mainstream media and this idea of neoliberalism has come in and has really corrupted people's minds in the sense that they're not even willing to push back against the establishment narrative anymore when some of them did so in their heyday. This is how far gone people are now. So they are booing him when they should be booing Nancy Pelosi.
Of getting us into war. Hey, why is it that you did not admit that there were no WMDs in Iraq?
Why would they boo about that? About the WMDs in Iraq? That was proven true that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Why would you boo about that?
You lied us into a war in Iraq. You got us into an invasion of Afghanistan. Now over 90% of those people are impoverished and are dying.
Someone just yelled at him that he's an a-hole. Why? He's telling you the truth. He's telling you the truth that the people in Afghanistan are impoverished. He's telling you the truth that they lied to you about the war in Iraq, but he's the one that's being booed because they see a politician like Nancy Pelosi as a celebrity figure. And this is the problem with propping up these politicians, putting them up on a pedestal to the point where they're not allowed to be challenged. Let's all remember when Christian Parenti was here and he talked about Richard Nixon. I'm going to clip that recently, by the way. That should be coming out this weekend. Christian Parenti was here and he talked about Richard Nixon. What was one of the things that Christian Parenti said? He said, yeah, Richard Nixon did some progressive things, but it was because he was pushed by the people to do so. Today, someone like Richard Nixon will be viewed as a celebrity type figure. Some of those same people who push Richard Nixon because of our celebrity culture would actually be applauding Richard Nixon and would boo the people who are trying to push him. That's how things have changed.
Why don't you tell the truth about Nord Stream? Why did we destroy Nord Stream? We're leaving millions of Germans without energy. You have a knack for getting us into war. People like you should be arrested.
Look at the looks on their faces, right? So he said that people in Germany are without energy. This is true. We've covered this on this show. We've talked about the people in the UK that can't pay for heat, that are having to go to facilities called warm banks just to get heat. This is all true. Problem is, most of the people in that audience don't even know that. They're not paying attention to international news that's outside of mainstream media. And mainstream media isn't really talking about those things either. It's really sad. So he goes on to say, you're a war criminal. This is actually Jose coming in. Let me scoot back just a little bit. There we go.
People like you should be arrested. You are a war criminal.
Hey, Congresswoman, I came to see a warmonger, but you're a sad old drunk. Get out.
That was funny. That's really funny.
What happened? When you went to Taiwan, were you looking for Ukraine? Did we blow up the Nord Stream on accident or on purpose? Did you know?
Now, here comes Captain Save, a politician, and he's yelling at Jose and telling him to sit down. Okay. Not willing to question or think about anything that these guys are saying. Let me stand up and fight for Miss Nancy Pelosi. Let me stand up and fight for this politician, these politicians that care so little for you. This politician whose district has one of the largest homeless populations in the country. Let me stand up and defend her at all costs when she does nothing for the American people.
How about that? Aren't you supposed to be part of the indictment tomorrow? You're a war criminal by definition, Miss Pelosi.
Here come the black guys. Look, they had to be a black guy, right? Here come the black guys like, go get him, go get him. Go get him. I don't know who this gentleman is that's trying to take Jose away. You should be backing Jose.
You got some nerve. Is that why you're here in Manhattan? Is that why you're here? Because you're getting indicted tomorrow, you goddamn war criminal? How many people have died in your fucking name? How many people have died because of Iraq? All of you for...
Here's this woman here whose face you can't see pointing her finger up and you be quiet, you shut up. Mob mentality. Mob mentality. Sometimes the one person that is removed is the most sane person in that room, the most sane person in the crowd. But the crowd, they're all sheep for the most part. They can't think for themselves. They won't do their own research. They believe what Don Lemon says. They believe what Rachel Maddow says. They think these people are actually journalists. That's how far gone things are right now. That is how far gone it is. These are our elders. These are our elders. Some of the same people who sat up there and fought during the Vietnam protests and said, no, this isn't right. They're killing kids over there. Now these people don't even want to question any type of war that the U.S. government pushes or sells on the American people, as if they have forgotten what has happened before. Just like that. They went from being protesters. They went from being activists to being sheep.
Forgot about Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria.
Dodd-Frank was always never going to work if we don't deal with the $600 trillion in derivatives.
This kind of reminds me, this gentleman here, like I told you, of course it had to be a black guy, right? This reminds me when Simone Sanders jumped across that stage to save Joe Biden from the protester that was coming to knock Joe Biden the fuck out. And Simone Sanders was not a bodyguard. She did all that for Joe Biden, and he wouldn't even make her his press secretary. Now you just look like a fool jumping across the stage to save someone who doesn't even want to give you the job. But that's him. Let me protect Nancy Pelosi at all cost.
Gonna work. If we don't deal with the 600 trillion in derivatives, then there's no chance for this economy. Don't you see it all fail?
So he's complaining about the economy. But again, like I told you, most of the people in the audience, they're not really affected by the economy the way that we are. A lot of these people, when we talk about like our parents' generation or the silent generation, some of these people have 2 homes. When I used to wait tables, they would come in and talk about, oh, we're just here in South Carolina visiting. This is our second home. Second home. Most of you can't even afford to get a first home. When it comes to the economy, a lot of these people are set. They didn't have to struggle the way that we did. This inflation isn't costing them the way it's costing us, right? They didn't have to take out as many student loans. Some of them didn't have to take out student loans at all because they were able to work a part-time job and pay for their tuition. You can't do that today. So they're not affected.
None of it hurts. None of it hurts. We need to sleep on the Democrats. Pathetic excuse.
And then you land your plane in Taiwan. We want a war with China at the same time. We want to all have nuclear bombs dropped on our heads. We live in Manhattan.
I have to ask you to leave. Thank you.
By the way, Lyndon LaRouche is back in a big way, and I'm here on behalf of everybody who loves peace and not war with Russia and war with...
Why would you boo about peace? This is how brainwashed people are. Someone is there calling for peace. Boo! Boo! Get him out of here! That makes no sense. No sense whatsoever.
China and a new hot war with the East.
They've become pro-war. Some of the same people who protested against the Vietnam War, they're pro-war now. Make it make sense to me. Now, there's more. Of course, there always is. Of course. There's an unedited version of this that Jose also posted. So he said the unedited version, so you can hear just how bad the crowd was. So I think he adjusted the audio and the other one so that you could actually hear what they were saying. So listen to this. See how they talking to him? Shut up, shut up. The majority of Americans are blind. They have no idea what's really going on. Now, I will say a little bit of good news here. I don't know if you guys were aware, but speaking of Jose, Do Dissidents is actually filming a documentary about Jose, and they have a snippet of that here. I thought what he said here was really interesting, so check this out.
Okay, that's a good direction. Stay where you are and just move. Okay, all right, Russell, ask your follow-up.
So there are a lot of people today trying to argue that classical culture is white, that it's for specifically white people, that it favors white people, that it was created by oppressively, by a very oppressive culture. So how would you respond to that?
Beethoven didn't want his music to be in concert halls. He didn't want it to be only for the exclusive or for his patrons. If he were alive today, he'd want it in the streets of Harlem. Classical culture is universal to every human being.
This is very true. I studied Beethoven. I was in band when I was in school. So I studied Beethoven when I lived in Germany. Obviously, Beethoven's really big there. But that is very true. Beethoven was not one of those musicians who wanted his music to be in like a concert hall or wanted it to be like this music that was for like this bougie upper crust class. That is what it became, but that is not what he wanted it to be. And I think he brings up a good point here about classical music. Some people do see this as only something that is for like a certain class of people to listen to or a certain race of people to listen to. I still remember when I was in band, you know, when you're in band, you have to learn how to play everything. So we played classical music, we played jazz songs, all of that stuff. We studied the Harlem Renaissance, all of that, because the music was really part of that, really a part of that age. So it was interesting to me that one of the things our band teacher had us do was to listen to different types of music, classical, jazz, all of those things. And I remember running into a gentleman one time, and I remember my CD fell out of my book bag, and it was one of the classical compilations that our band teacher had told us to listen to. And he was shocked, and he handed it back to me and said, "You listen to this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I wouldn't expect you to listen to that." And I remember thinking to myself, like, why? Is classical music only for a certain type of people? Plus, I was in the band. Those of us that are in band, like, you kind of listen to everything, right? But that's a good point that Jose made there, because I think people need to understand that music is music, and it shouldn't really matter, you know, what race you are, what class you are when it comes to that.
Shakespeare understood that. Beethoven understood that. Francisco Goya understood that. All classical culture, if people just decided to dive into it and really understand it and study it, they would see the jokes that they would find in Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote are funny today as they were funny 500 years ago. You know, you can go see a Shakespeare play and you will be shook to your core, or you will be laughing, or you'll be crying, just as people were almost 500 years ago. I mean, or you could listen to Beethoven's Ninth, you know, the Ode to Joy, the Ante Freude, and you'll be in tears, and you'll be just as moved as people were when it first premiered, you know, back in the early 1800s. This is for everyone, and the people making it knew it was for everyone.
So that's awesome. So they're working on that documentary there of Jose. I can't wait to see the finished product in reference to that. But I think that, you know, Jose is one of those people. It's not just him, but some of his friends as well. Like, they are not willing to sit back and just let things remain the same in this country when it comes to the way the politicians have been handling things in this country. And I really look towards like the Gen Z generation, because I've noticed this as well. Like, they don't give a fuck. Like, they do not care. They're just like, whatever. We are not putting up with it. And I think we need more of that energy back in this country. Thank you for the super chat, Vegan. The irony. Yeah. You're talking to in reference to the Vietnam protests. JB says, I like classical music. A lot of new video game music is classical now. That is true.